hose quality on this filter is generally pretty good. These knobs that you use to go and tighten onto the hose work very well. I've had no leaks at all. Seems to be reasonably well made. There is an issue when you put it into the housing. You push it down to lock it. It opens the valves. When you pull this up, it closes the valves. There's a couple things. One is that these protrusions inside the housing should be thicker. They tend to move around. They can cause small leaks. This part is pretty good, except for one thing. There's two ball valves, and they're tiny little spindles that go to this handle right here. What will happen is they'll break off. One of the ball valves will stop turning or lock halfway through. It'll pressurize the filter, and then half the water from your tank or whatever will dump all over your hardwood floor, which is exactly what happened to me. They have to put a thicker spindle going to the ball valves. Very, very poor design. I think independent valves with this coming up would be much, much better than something like this. Other parts of the filter, the parts that actually go into your tank, that is the different plastic parts, are very, very thin. Some of them are alright, but your discharge tube will crack when you try to put it together no matter how careful you are. It's something that's been commented on before in different forms. The primer itself is pretty good. As long as I pre-filled this, 5 or 6 hard pumps and everything was running fine. On the side, trying to push it down and lock it, you have to do a little bit of wiggling, but it works fairly well. I find that these side handles are very easily removed. They will pop out on you and fall onto the floor. This part of the housing should be made thicker so that the handle is kept properly attached and doesn't discharge. I mean, they work alright, but if this was a little thicker in here and held it a little bit better, you wouldn't have that aggravation. When you open the filter and take it apart, you'll notice a couple of things. One is the 9-watt UV light. There's a glass tube over it. This glass tube is held in place by this little tiny slide that applies pressure over the top of it. You'll find that, as in my case, there's moisture inside there. Moisture and electricity usually don't mix well. And the reason is that they use a double O-ring. They push down, but only this tiny little tab holds it in place. And if you have any imperfections at all in the housing, it leaks by. I have always had moisture in this. I have greased these O-rings with O-ring lubricant, put it back together, but it continually leaks. They might come up with a screw system or something that might work better with a half-round seated O-ring in the bottom rather than something like this. The light still does continue to work, but there is always moisture in there. The second thing I've noticed is that this impeller comes out very, very easily. And all it does is rely on basically a wedge that's half turned. These little nipples right here on both sides should have be longer and have more of an angle so it locks securely. What's happened to me twice is that this thing is being put together, it's running fine, this comes loose, pops out under use, and stops pumping and the whole unit overheats. So unfortunately, the way that's designed, retaining it, is not very well done. I mean, you'd think it looks like it's secure, doesn't move, you add a little bit of vibration, it moves over a little bit, this whole thing comes loose and now your filter stops working. The inside, and this particular filter has 3 trays. They work all right. I find that the handle does exactly what it does right there. It moves over and jams like that. If they had made this a little bit more robust, then this whole handle would come up and down a lot easier and it wouldn't jam. If you go and try to put it together and your handle is jammed up, or if you have filter media stuck under here and it's not all the way down, the unit will not assemble correctly. So for example, in this tray 2, I have the ceramic bag. If this ceramic bag isn't flattened in the center, the handle won't go down all the way, and you'll have issues in going and closing the unit. I opened mine a lot and cleaned it out, and the reason I did that was I have a dirt tank, and in the first few months I had a lot of plant media. You can see what I get in that, and that's probably just a week's use. So I was cleaning it a lot. I did find that the design uses an O-ring, and it's too bad they didn't make this housing round. I find that it's a little bit thin. You can see how I can move it. And when you put the O-ring in, there isn't quite enough pressure. If you have any kind of issues at all with pressurizing the unit, it will leak all over the place. The O-ring just does not provide a very good seal in this particular design. They either have to make it a little bit tighter, or they've got to make this housing a little bit thicker. It's a shame it's designed that way. Also, I've noticed that the groove that's in the lid has some really sharp edges. You have to be careful along the edges. It's just because of a bad mold. And you could go and cut your O-ring, and if you don't inspect your O-ring and you've got a cut in it and put it in, you might end up with water on your floor again. Those are the only comments I have on this filter. I found that once the ball valve went and it started leaking, no matter what I did, if I tip it under use over to the side, water will come running out of it. I mean, what do you expect for 38 bucks? It's a great deal for a filter, but I've now spent over $100, and it primes faster. There's independent ball valves, and I have none of the issues I have with this filter. So if you want something for a basement floor that you don't really worry about hardwood or anything like that, it might be an okay filter, especially if you're not going to open and close it a lot. If you plan to clean it a lot, you might want to spend more money. That's the only comments I have to make. Thank you very much.